Hello! Forgot to move the chair. I am not a morning person! it's like 5 to 11, but yeah, I'm still tired. Oh shit, I forgot to take my medication. I'll take it after I do this. God, it's hot. But I'm okay. It's bearable to be in my uniform, just about. So, what should I do today? Now there's a thought. Bloody big book. It's going to take a brutally long time, but would you care to hear the Divine Comedy over the course of the next many years? That seems like a terrible idea, but yeah. And I think I could just about do this and not want to die. Oh my god, no. Forget it. I don't think it'd be interesting. I'm just gonna pick another random one of these. Okay, here's one. Another one I've not heard before. It's starting to dawn on me that I only read about 3 of these before I actually started, But yeah. Shonks and the Dragon. Me, said the Lord of the Manor of Pelham. You, said his daughter, namely Miss Helena. Eleanor. You've no choice. The Lord of the Manor, alias Sir Pierre's Shonks, crossed the huge trunk of his left leg over the huge trunk of his right leg, and sighed terribly. He stared into the fire until his eyeballs were burning. He said. Think of Sigurd and Beowulf and Carantok, exclaimed Eleanor. Tittle-tattle, said Shonks. Asapattle, you mean, said Eleanor. Prittle-prattle, muttered her father. And now, exclaimed Eleanor, Sir Pierre's Shonks. Shonks, conks, honks, said the Lord of the Manor of Pelham. Does it sound as if I'm a dragon slayer? Brave men need dragons, Eleanor said. And there were dragons dancing in her eyes. I don't need a dragon, said Shonks. No, thank you. You do, said Eleanor, to prove yourself. Anyhow, you've got no choice. I have, said Shonks. You've no choice in the matter, Eleanor repeated. You're the Lord of the Manor, and he's the dragon of Brent Pelham. You've got to fight him. The Lord of the Manor had a difficult dream. He had decided once and for all not to fight the dragon. Dragons be blowed, he could hear himself saying. Dragons be blowed, be blasted, be brumagemmed. I don't know what that means. But then the dragon of Brent Pelham came visiting. It shrived into the manor, and most mysteriously seemed to turn into his daughter, so that whenever Shonks looked at Eleanor, he seemed to be looking at the dragon. And then, even more strangely, Shonks dreamt he was turning into the dragon himself. He was becoming a wrongdoer, an evil flamethrower, and the very people who depended on him now began to avoid him. So when Shonks woke up, sweating and cold, after a horrible argument with his sheets and blankets, he knew his daughter was right. He had no choice. In the name of every man, woman, and child living in Brent Pelham, why, in his own name, modest as it was, he had to fight the dragon. "Brute," said Shonks most miserably. "Bigonet, bastion, blabber, bodily, bone white." On and on he went, as if he were a walking lexicon, but quite what he was talking about is impossible to tell. If anything, Sir Pierre's Shonks' armour was even more reluctant than its owner. It had long since gone into retirement. Its shoulders and elbows and knees and ankles creaked and cracked, and for year after year armies of clothes moths had picnicked in the woolen padding inside the helmet. "Darn," grumbled Shonks, and then drat, devil's teeth. "Courage," said Eleanor, helping her father secure his sword belt. "That's what you're going to need, my girl," said Shonks. "Me?" said Eleanor. "I'm taking you with me." Eleanor's eyes opened sky-wide. "You're the best man I've got," said her father. "Anyhow, I'm between squires." So while the armourer oiled Shonks's groaning joints, and the blacksmith stropped his sword and spear, Eleanor stepped upstairs and changed into the best dress in her garderobe. And now for my snood," she said. "Snood. I hate that word." The dragon had made a mess of Brent Pelham. He had set fire to 2 of the embattled old oaks, guardians of the village green since the days of King Alfred. He had flattened whole hedgerows, and worst of all, he had knocked down 7 little crook cottages, eaten 3 harvest-heavy pigs and dozens of chickens, and blown out the new nativity window at the east end of the church. "Blessed Virgin preserve me," said Shonks. "She's nothing but glass splinters," Eleanor said. "All over the churchyard. You'll have to make do with the saints. St. Martha and St. George, Philip and Paul." Father and daughter galloped along the ride between great Pepsels and little Pepsels, and Shonks' 3 best hounds galloped beside them, and all 3 went so fleet and light of foot that one man, rather the worse for wear, was quite certain they had wings. In both fields the poor corn looked as if it had run this way and run that way and pressed its ears to the ground, and afterward, underground, in its lair beneath the roots of the great yew tree, the dragon heard them coming. It rose to the light. "Dear God," said Shonks, and then "Back! Back!" he shouted to Eleanor. "My beautiful, brightest, best, my everything else beginning with B." Then Shonks dismounted, and he and the dragon joined battle. Shonks raised his ashen spear, and the dragon raised its head. It bellowed, it blew out vile sulphurous smoke. Many is the battle won by mistake. When the dragon threw fire at him, Shonks stepped sideways to avoid the jet stream. He stepped and tripped and fell forward, and falling he thrust his spear right down the dragon's throat. Said the dragon. "Gargle and spit. Humans, horses, hounds, and all the birds in heaven itself were coated with flecks of pink foam. It made the 3 hounds grin and sneeze. "Listen to the birds," shouted Shonks. "Life! That's what they're singing. Life, life, life!" "Father!" called Eleanor. Quickly she dismounted. Then she picked up her skirts, ran towards Shonks over the bumpy ground, and threw herself into his metal embrace. When Sir Piers and Miss Eleanor had disentangled themselves, They saw a man leaning quite nonchalantly against one side of the dead dragon. "Good morning," he said, and he smiled and blew on his long white fingers. He was very slight, and his hair and eyes were both dark. "Good morning to you both." "Where have you come from?" asked Shonks. "Immediately," said the man. "From Cambridge." "Or do you mean, how did I get here?" "Well," said Shonks, "I haven't seen you around here before." "No," said the man, still smiling, and he flexed his fingers. "I live in your hereafter." "My hereafter? So we should be seeing plenty of one another before too long." "What do you mean?" asked Eleanor. She took her father's arm. "What's your name?" "I have many names," said the little man quite affably. "Some say the Great Dragon." "I know my book of Revelation," said Shonks quickly. "I know who you are." "Then you know why I'm here," said the man. "St. Matthew and St. Mark and St. Luke and St. John," murmured Shonks. "May they trample the dragon under their feet." "I see you've killed my servant," said the little man. "Well, a life for a life, you've killed the dragon of Brent Pelham. So when you die, Piers Shonks, I'll have you." "No!" cried Shonks. "Not, never, numquam." "Oh yes, Shonks, I'll have you, body and soul." "Not if I'm buried inside the church. I'll have them bury me inside the church." "Inside the church, outside the church, it doesn't matter to me. I'll have you either way." "Never!" shouted Shonks again. The man winked at Miss Eleanor. "And you, my pretty," he said, "you're my witness." Pierre Shonks shook off one of his gauntlets and bowed his head and crossed himself. "I commend my soul to God," he said, "and when I die, my body will lie undisturbed and sleep, exactly where I choose." The man arched his black eyebrows and smiled at Shonks. There were flames in his freezing eyes. Then he simply stamped one foot and disappeared. Years passed, and Sir Pierre Shonks became old. He became very old, and his mouth became dry. "Dreary devil, dragon, dropsical, Dunstable," muttered Shonks as he lay on his deathbed, "and everything else beginning with D." And then, rallying himself considerably, "Carry me outside, bring me my longbow." 6 manor servants lifted the lord of the manor of Pelham, still lying on his bed. They carried him down to the moat, and there Miss Eleanor put his longbow in his speckled hands. "Cut from the great yew, the one between great Pepsels and little Pepsels," said Eleanor. "Do you remember, father?" "Oh, do shut up," said Shonks. "Give me an arrow." Shonks screwed up his eyes and drew in his lips and notched an arrow. "Now listen to me," he said. "I'll shoot this one arrow and then I'll die." The manor servants began to get down on their knees in the wet grass. "Bury me wherever this arrow falls, wherever it falls. Do you understand me?" The 6 servants nodded. "As you choose, father," said Miss Eleanor. "Inside or outside, indeed," grumbled Shonks. "Inside the church, outside the church, I'll show him." Then the lord of the manor of Pelham summoned up all the remaining strength in his body. He drew back the bowstring as far as he could, and then even a little further, and released it. The string hummed and shuddered and fell still, but the arrow flew singing through the bright air. It rose and sped and dipped and stuck into the north wall of Brent Pelham Church. Sir Shonks died smiling, not inside the church, not outside the church. He was buried deep within the church wall. The devil reached out his long white fingers, and he still could not touch him. That was interesting. It just kind of went nowhere, didn't it? There's a poem between books, if you're curious. Well, now I will try and tell how the poacher work. There are many ways of taking pheasants and other game: the gun, the hingle or snare, the trap and the net. When the poacher enter a wood, as I have said before, he goes with the wind in his face, as pheasants always sit facing the wind to keep their feathers down. He draws along as quietly as possible till he see his bird, then crawl within shot of it and kill it. Years ago we used to use a sight of this kind: cut a pair of ears out of a stuffed piece of leather, and use it on the muzzle of the gun, so it looked like rabbit ears on the end. The snare is used when the pheasants creep through hedges, a bow stick being put around the hingle to make the bird drop his head. Another way is to make a hole in the ground 3 inch deep and 2 inch across the top. The hingle is laid round the hole that have already been partly filled with white peas. He come along and put his head in the hole, bring the hingle up on his neck, and is very soon dead. George Baldry. Everything in this book is weird! The in-between poems that don't read like poems, the books, the stories, they're so weird, it's all so very bloody strange. Oh well. It's just about the weirdest thing ever, but I guess we'll revisit it in the future. Cheerio.